this video in the series, we're going to look at the setup menu. The setup menu controls all of the main parameters that sit behind the board. So on the first page, we're looking at all of our global settings. So working left to right, we have a little screen which shows the firmware version that you're working on. Then just below this, you have a system control, which allows you to shut down, reboot, or update the firmware. If you're updating the firmware, it will ask you to insert the firmware on a USB up here, and then it will update everything for you. I highly recommend you back everything up before you do that. Next across is our audio settings. So we've got the option to work at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. Then below that we can set our clock source. So we can either have that internal, which is the board, the AES50 A or B, whichever one you've got plugged in, or if you have both plugged in, you can choose one of those, and then the expansion card slot, which sits at the back. Then we have the opportunity to do some resetting, so we can reset the console back to its factory settings. We can reset the show data, which is all of your cues, scenes, snippets. We can reset the libraries, which are your libraries for all of your presets around setups, around effects units, and around channel strips. And then we can do a full factory reset. So we've also got the opportunity to export or restore from a backup. This will also be from the USB. And then we can create a custom boot. So that will allow us to change the way that the board turns itself on. Next to that, we've got date and time options, so you can change that. Then we have the ability to change our screen brightness, LED brightness, which is on the board. LED, I don't know if you can see that here. And then our channel contrast. This affects the contrast of the scribble strips. So then we go across a page into our config. So this is how we want to sort of set up some of the commands or some of the options for commands. So across the left hand side we get lots of different options. So we've got pop-up preferences, so it'll ask us if we actually want to do something, so when we're overwriting files or if we're loading scenes. Then we've got the select preferences, so if you're selecting stuff you can return to the last, which enables you to return to the previous page that you were on. You can follow the fader layers, or you can have the fader select. So the general preferences, this one is all about the scenes. So if you have this selected, you are pressing the go button automatically and selects the next cue scene snippet after loading the one that's currently in use. So if you're working in a theatre setting and your show is accurately mapped out, every time you press go on the scenes, which is here, it will load the next cue scene or snippet in the line. Then we have safe main levels. So this will automatically, when you turn the desk on, this will turn the main fader to 0, and then you can change the clock to be 12 hours. So that's this clock up here. Then we have our mute systems. So you can add additional functionality to the muting. So the hard mutes, when enabled, the individual channel mutes will take precedence over mute groups. DCA groups, when enabled, will act as mute groups. So if you mute a DCA, it will mute everything that is loaded into that DCA. You need to be careful if you are adding one channel to multiple DCAs. because then you may be turning stuff off you don't want to. And then the invert LEDs, when enabled, the mute button LEDs will light up when corresponding channel signal is on. So if you mute something that's not on, it won't light up. Then you have the show view. So you have the option to select scenes, cues, or snippets. So when you press the view button on the scenes area of the board, this is the first one that will load up. I've got it set to scenes because that's generally where I work. And then you can set your recorder view below there. So then we have our linking preferences. So if you link a channel to another channel, so you want to make something left and right, or something is left and right and you link them together, you can actually EQ them separately, you can compress them separately if these are unselected, and you can actually have it so you have them at different levels. That'll probably be quite useful if you've got left and right guitar amps, so you're running a stereo guitar amp rig and one's dirty and one's clean, you can then adjust them to suit. That'll also be useful to have your dynamics linked in that situation, because then you can maintain levels for those. Panning mode, so I've always got my desk set up to left, right, and then the sub as ascend, or you can have them as left, right, center. Then we have the bus configurations down here. So you can actually change all 16 buses to be 16 pre, 16 post, 8 pre, 8 post, and then all the various options. I'm not going to read you through those. The next page we get our remote. This left hand side here deals with the door remote. If you want to find out how that works and how to set up this desk in Pro Tools, go and check out one of my other videos. But it's very simple. You can enable the button or disable the button, which means that you won't get into any sticky situations if it's disabled when you're doing live mixing. And then you can change how the desk is sending information. So you could actually have it being sent via MIDI into the computer, which is then using Pro Tools utilizes Huey. I know that different DAWs use different protocols. On this right hand side we've got a MIDI control, so we can actually set our the same as within the remote section. We can actually set our MIDI messaging system to be over USB or MIDI or RTP. Then we can select the options of what we want to actually change with MIDI, so within the MIDI messages that are sent. And then just below that we have the opportunity to tell our X-Touch, if we're using an X-Touch small desk, we can set that. If we were using that with something like X32 Rack, for example, we could set that to be over MIDI, or we could set it to be over Ethernet. The next page is our network. This allows us to change our IP settings to match the IP settings of the router, which is plugged in the back of the desk. Then we have the names and icons. This is specifically for the channels, so we can change our channel names. One quick tip is if we go to home and we select the channel, say channel 5, if I wanted to go to that naming, I can hold select above the channel strip, press utility, and it takes me straight into that menu. So it means you don't have to go rooting around in setup. So this is controlling specifically what's happening on the scribble strip. So you can see what different colours, we've got different icons, we've got predefined names, or we can edit that name ourselves. So if you're in this menu, we just come out of that. If we're in this menu, if you hit utility, it will take you straight to the naming. Then preamps, we've got access to all of our preamps where locally on AES50, and we can manually set those in banks of 4. So as we go down, we can set those to what we want them to be. We've also got the opportunity to lock stage boxes, and then we can have some remote functionality for the ports. The layer system that exists here only moves you between these two. And then we have our card configuration. So this is the card that is inserted at the back. I've got the USB because that came as standard, but I know you can get FireWire and other odds and ends. And that allows you to change the amount of in and outs that are going over that. I stick with 32 in and out because I tend to do a lot of live recording of bands, etc., and it's useful just for that to be set to 32, and then I can use less if I want to. So that takes us through the setup menu. Nice place to make sure that everything's tickety-boo with your desk.